Legally required presence of members here, so I'm going to start again with the obligatory hybrid announcement. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I call to order this joint meeting of the Sea Power and Readiness Subcommittees of the House Armed Services Committee. First, some administrative technical notes. Members are reminded they must keep visible on screen within the software platform for the purposes of identity verification. Members must continue to use the platform's video function while attending the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact the committee staff for assistance. When you are recognized, video will be broadcast via television and internet feeds. You will be recognized as normal for questions. If you want to speak at another time, you must seek recognition verbally. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking and remember to unmute prior to speaking. Please be aware that there is a slight lag between when you start speaking and when the camera shot switches to you. Please remember to keep the software platform's video function on for the entirety of the time that you are attending this hearing. If you leave for a short period of time for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, please leave your video function on. If you're leaving to join a different proceeding or will be absent for a significant period of time, you should exit the software platform entirely. Please be advised I have designated a committee staff member to mute unrecognized members' microphones if necessary. Please use the platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues. Finally, if you see a 5-minute countdown clock on the software platform's display, but if necessary, I'll remind you that your time is up. With that said, I want to make a few opening remarks. Again, it's a pleasure today to have with us General Jacqueline Van Ovost and Ms. Lucinda Leslie, who, again, are just outstanding public servants. I think a lot of us have had the opportunity to speak with both witnesses recently and want to thank them for their engagement ahead of today's hearing. General, as this is your first appearance before these committees, I'd like to welcome you and congratulate you as you finish your 6th month as the commander of U.S. Transcom. I want to note that this is the first of our posture hearings following release of the 2023 budget. It is fitting that we are starting with the focus on the important role that our air and sea mobility capabilities play in our nation's defense. We're seeing that actually play out right now, the impact of the work that the mobility enterprise does. As General Van Ovost and her team pointed out to me recently, our mobility forces have conducted over 200 missions in support of the effort to deliver weapons and supplies to the brave people fighting in Ukraine. Today, the ships and aircraft that comprise our sea lift and airlift capabilities are challenged by readiness shortfalls, obsolescence, and evolving threat landscape. Congress has acted on a bipartisan basis in past years to address some of these issues, and I fully expect that our panels will continue this work as we develop this year's NDAA. I'd like to note a few priorities as we begin our discussion. First, with full authorization and funding now in place, the tanker security program is now the law of the land. This effort has taken on new importance with the recent decision to close the Red Hill fuel facility, and we're eager to get this program underway. I look forward to an update on the stand-up of this program. Second, I remain very concerned about the path forward on recapitalization of our sea lift fleet. In just a decade, nearly 3/4 of our fleet will reach the end of their service life. The 2023 budget requests funding to produce 2 additional used ships, in addition to the 7 already authorized and funded but not yet in place. I remain firmly committed to the 3-pronged strategy that we have adopted of cost-effective life extensions for current ships, procurement of a discrete number of used ships, and the start of a domestic new build effort. Right now, we are seeing the first of the 5 national security multi-mission vessels under construction today at the Philly shipyard, revitalizing that shipyard and employing hundreds of new shipbuilders. Congress, led by this panel, initiated this program a number of years ago with flexible contracting authorities to enable the cost-effective construction of these new boats, and we have done the same for a future new build sea lift program. We will continue to look at an all of the above plan for sea lift rather than the either-or choice between used or new ships. Third, we remain laser-focused on the requirements of our aerial refueling and tactical airlift fleets. In particular, the congressionally directed Mobility Capability Requirements Study 2020 outlined clear requirements for our tactical airlift fleet comprised of our C-130s, underscored the need to extend and recapitalize the strategically critical fleet. We must continue to examine the budget to ensure that these requirements are met. Lastly, I want to note my appreciation to Acting Administrator Leslie for her work on restarting the Sea Year program at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. The Academy and the Sea Year program play a critical role in the support and training of our mariners. That is exactly why I and others feel so strongly about ensuring that it has the tools and policies in place to respond to serious concerns about student safety while at sea. We have more work to do, and I look forward to hearing more about that today and how we, Congress, MARAD, and the Maritime Academies can work collaboratively to ensure the continued success of the Academy. I'd like to finish by just noting that today is the last day of his role as majority staff on the Sea Power Subcommittee, Phil McNaughton. Phil's been a valued member of this subcommittee since 2014 and has assisted me over the years over and over again. He's had a profound impact on the work we do here for the men and women who serve and defend our nation, and I'm deeply grateful for all he's done to help myself and every member of our subcommittee. Today is his last hearing because he then moves up to policy staff lead for the full committee, and we all look forward to his leadership in that important new role. I would also like to officially welcome our new staff lead, Jay Valerio, who will assume duties tomorrow. Again, thank you to both witnesses. The old saying that Omar Bradley, that strategy is for amateurs, logistics is for professionals. You two are both consummate professionals, and we really are thrilled to have you here today. And with that, I will now yield to Mr. Whitman for opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo your accolades for Phil. Phil McNaughton has been incredible. In fact, I tell folks, before Phil was on the staff, I put my life in his hands multiple times as he flew aircraft with us in or on board. So, Phil, thank you for your steady hand there in that aircraft. And thank you, too, for your steady hand here on the committee. I consider you a friend and an incredibly talented professional on staff. You've done a great job in working together to do a lot of things for our nation's defense, especially our Navy and Marine Corps team and Air Force. So thank you. Our nation's better off for your service, so we appreciate that. And I want to thank Chairman Courtney for yielding, and especially thank Chairman Garamendi and Ranking Member Walz for participating in another joint hearing this month to discuss our mobility forces. The people of Ukraine have been fighting valiantly against Vladimir Putin's Russian invasion, and Ukrainian forces have particularly targeted an overextended Russian logistics line, causing Russian forces across multiple axes to grind to a halt. If there's anything in this war that we can use as a lesson learned, it's the value of our logistics forces and their need to pace with combat forces. Unfortunately, as I review our nation's mobility forces, I see many areas that will cause dangerous parallels with the Russian logistics failures. For example, the Air Force has proposed to reduce our tanker force structure by 24 aircraft over the next 2 years. Navy continues to underinvest in surge sea lift forces, particularly harming the Army and the Marines. Navy and Marine Corps are programmed to pull the plug on a list of maritime preposition forces. And while there's been much stated need about our requirement to invest in our intertheater connectors, Army continues to reduce watercraft, while Navy and Marine Corps efforts to support light amphibious warships and next-generation logistics ships continue to slip to the right. And just to add some additional logistics woes, the Red Hill debacle highlights the inadequacies of our malpositioned fuel stores throughout the Indo-Pacific. In my estimation, our mobility and logistics forces are in a clear decline. To be frank, the administration talks about our pacing challenge of China and the acute threat of Russia, but their budget requests continue to have more bark than bite. On the other hand, they just may not understand the basics of warfare that require strong logistics to sustain our combat forces forward. We have to deliver a comprehensive strategy to address our acute shortcomings. I would propose a strategy that expands our tanker security program, that ensures our intra-theater connector strategy, that is coupled with a preposition force appropriate for the Pacific distances our forces will be required to traverse, that we also have an adequate surge sea lift force, and that we have adequate bulk fuel stores positioned at the correct locations before we pull the plug on Red Hill. Fortunately, we have the correct witnesses to help us better hone our logistics strategy as we prepare our fiscal 2023 markup. I look forward to reviewing this varied list of issues during our discussions today. In closing, I'm reminded of our foremost military tactician, Sun Tzu, who indicated the line between disorder and order lies in logistics. I remain convinced that we should reject the disorder offered by our current logistics vision and work with my Democrat colleagues to correct the more egregious elements of this failing budget request. Again, I appreciate Chairman Courtney, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Waltz for all of their effort and support on this important hearing. And again, want to give my undying gratitude and thanks to Phil McNaughton. Wish him all the best in his future. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. I'll now yield to our colleagues from the Readiness Subcommittee, Chairman Garamendi, for opening remarks.
We'll just move down. Social distancing. I'll just finish up here. I won't go back to Billy Long, although that might be a useful way to hasten all of these hearings. The second is just ask that my opening statement be in the record, since most of this was covered by your opening statement, Mr. Courtney. There are a couple of things that I do want to bring up, and this builds on what our colleague Rob Whitman just raised, and that is the totality of logistics. The tanker program is a good start, but it's not even a sufficient start, just good to get started. Over the last several years, we've heard repeatedly about sustaining the fight, CSBA's sustaining the fight, resilient maritime logistics, strengthening the U.S. defense maritime industry from the Department of Transportation, goals and objectives of a stronger maritime nation. All of these fit together. They fit together in a way that we should spend this year's NDAA building a national maritime security strategy that goes all the way through the steps necessary to be able to support our military wherever they may be around the world. Air power is certainly a piece of that. But it is the ocean that will transport 90% of all of the material. And we're simply not there. From the continental United States to the most distant possible point of war, we do not have in place today the fleet, the ships, the vessels, the personnel to sustain ourselves. And so let us work on that and look at doing it a way in which we can actually afford it. The budget for the Navy, as Mr. Whitman said, doesn't seem to be enough. It will never be enough to build the fleet necessary to handle the transportation, the logistics. I believe we can do that using the fleet that we presently have and build that fleet. It's called the Jones Act fleet. If that fleet were made militarily useful, subsidized with programs that already exist, not only for the Marine, but also for the air, I believe we can make this happen. So I want to pursue that. That'll be my goal, and part of my questions will go to that effect. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. Your statement is entered without objection. Congressman Walz, ranking member from Readiness, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Courtney and Ranking Member Whitman, Chairman Garamendi. And I also want to join you in thanking our witnesses here today from MARAD and Transcom. And I think we're all in agreement here that our ability to confront future adversaries absolutely and fundamentally depends on sea lift, airlift, and ground logistics, and their ability to distribute the goods the warfighters need. And you know, as several have mentioned, I think we're going to be talking about for the foreseeable future that we have to look no further than Russia's current blunders and stalled convoys in in Ukraine to understand the importance of logistics and sustainment. And everyone has had their logistics quote. And my favorite is logistics wins wars, and it loses wars. Obviously, the Indo-Pacific region subjects our forces to the tyranny of distance, and it will be contested. And nearly all of our forward combat unit equipment will have to move by sea. As many on this committee have been working for quite some time, and I hope to add to this effort, dealing with the fact that our ships are old, some are close to obsolete. Our turbo activations have yielded inconsistent and troubling readiness rates in the past several years. Combatant commanders plan for 85% success rate, and so we absolutely have to. I think we're all been talking about it for a while, at least as long as I've been here. We have to really start taking meaningful actions so that surge and sustainment sea lift is ready to deliver. And I think it is also as important, and I do appreciate the department's briefings in the last few weeks on how important it will be to have access to fuel in the Indo-Pacific. But again, I'm concerned about our timeline to fully get there, so that the combatant commander has the full access that he needs. The decision to close Red Hill is absolutely forced, and I think accelerated the larger conversation about operational requirements for fuel in the region. A path forward to make us more secure is becoming clear, but again, we have a long way to go. The tanker security program is absolutely a good start, but is in its infancy. Loitering, inter and intra theater operations, I think it's clear, will require additional vessels than the 10 accounted for by the TSP. And intra-theater assets like lightering and smaller operational support vessels are critical to success. Yet, at least thus far, I have yet to see a plan or a model to truly employ them. So I look forward to hearing our witnesses' perspective on whether TSP should be expanded, and on whether some other model is being contemplated to support requirements. Reliance on commercial partnerships, as we've discussed in the last few days, absolutely can be advantageous, expeditious, critical to the mission, but I am concerned about some inherent risks in those relationships. And I look forward to your updates and what your organizations are doing to pursue hardening, particularly against cyber threats, and to mitigate against challenges posed by CCP influence, both direct and indirect, soft power and hard power. The bottom line is we can no longer rely on ensured access to surge and sustain our forces. I know that Transcom can influence, but not direct, service budget decisions. However, Transcom should be concerned by any action, including fleet reductions and delayed recapitalization resulting in unacceptable risks to force projection. Our threats are evolving. Mobility enterprise absolutely must keep pace. And lastly, I'd like to mention global household goods. I appreciate, particularly with you, ma'am, our recent discussions on the topic. I have a better understanding of the current state of play with the ongoing challenges to the award, but Transcom has to get this right. This is a no-fail mission. It is too important to retention, to our service members and to their families who already sacrificed so much. So moving forward, I absolutely plan to stay engaged and focused on ensuring that our service members are put first by a moving delivery model that is competitive and transparent and accountable. And finally, I absolutely, General Van Opst, want to thank the men and women of your command, particularly when it comes to the heroic work they're doing to support the effort in Ukraine and for the Afghanistan withdrawal. Afghanistan in particular, I believe will be a stain on our moral conscience and has undermined our credibility around the world. But when Transcom was given the order, they absolutely performed a nearly impossible task. So again, I thank the witnesses. I look forward to having a candid discussion. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Now recognize General Van Opst for her opening remarks.
Chairman Courtney, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Whitman, Ranking Member Waltz, distinguished members of the committee, good afternoon. It's my honor to join you today with my senior enlisted leader, Fleet Master Chief Donald Myrick, to represent the men and women of the United States Transportation Command. Every day, I am immensely proud of their contributions to our nation's defense. TRANSCOM operates an agile and resilient logistics enterprise comprised of our military components, commercial partners, and industry teammates delivering for our nation, our allies, and our partners around the world. We project and sustain the world's most capable military force. The speed and reliability at which we execute these missions demonstrates our nation's resolve and serves as a deterrent to our adversaries. However, the world is evolving, and the complex contested environment that's emerging will test the future readiness of our enterprise and challenge TRANSCOM's ability to deliver a decisive force for high-end conflict when needed. It's imperative that we evolve into a more agile, resilient mobility force through focused modernization and recapitalization of our capabilities to ensure that we remain ready now and into the future. My top readiness concern remains Sealift, as 70% of our government-owned surge Sealift ships will approach the end of their service life in 10 years. I greatly appreciate your support on the authorization and funding of the first steps of our Sealift recapitalization effort. The funding for 5 used ships in the FY22 omnibus appropriation will enable us to continue this vital process, and we look forward to working with the Navy to satisfy restrictions in current law to execute these purchases. Next, air refueling is critical to our joint forces' ability to deploy and employ an immediate force. I appreciate your continued support to funding KC-46 recapitalization program and the critical modifications to the KC-135 aircraft. We must continue to modernize and recapitalize our aging air refueling assets to ensure they remain agile, resilient, and relevant for the future fight. One last and very critical thought. Cyber is an area of significant vulnerability for TRANSCOM, as we are inextricably linked to commercial industry, and 90% of our systems operate outside the Department of Defense Information Network. So we remain focused on strengthening the partnership with our transportation providers to mitigate cyber vulnerabilities. As such, cyber resiliency and digital modernization initiatives are a top priority. In closing, I'd like to say that I'm pleased to join Acting Maritime Administrator Leslie, and I thank her for MARAD's continued partnership with TRANSCOM in meeting the challenges of global maritime mobility. Administrator Leslie and I had the opportunity to visit the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, an institute whose graduates play a vital role in our nation's defense and economy. Nearly 85% of the Navy's strategic sealift officers, these are military officers that integrate commercial vessels into military fleets during operations, are alumni of Kings Point. This is a skill set that will be in high demand as we operate in the contested logistics environment. I'd like to thank you once again for your leadership and the support that you provide for our service members, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Now recognize Acting Administrator Lucinda Leslie from the Maritime Administration.
Good afternoon, Chairman Courtney, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Whitman, Ranking Member Waltz, and members of the subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Maritime Administration's role in supporting the nation's strategic sealift capabilities. Thank you also for your support during my tenure at MARAD, and let me also offer my congratulations to Phil. I've had the honor of serving as the Acting Maritime Administrator for more than a year now. Without question, it has been a year of unprecedented challenges. However, the Biden-Harris administration has been working to meet these challenges by strengthening both our merchant marine and sealift, and by quickly implementing a historic investment in our nation's ports and inland and near coastal waterways. MARAD deeply appreciates the support of Congress, and particularly the leadership of the members of this committee and of these subcommittees for your support for our sealift capabilities. That said, the average age of the vessels in the Ready Reserve is more than 46, which makes recapitalization critical to maintaining readiness. Equipment casualties have increased, and the challenges of replacing obsolete equipment make ship activations and operations more difficult. MARAD has, of course, awarded our vessel acquisition manager contract, and 2 used vessels were selected for procurement in 2021. The first vessel was delivered to MARAD this month, and delivery of the second vessel is imminent. However, the rate of recapitalization is limited by the number of vessels we are authorized to purchase. Separately, as has been mentioned, construction is well underway on the first 2 of 5 national security multi-mission vessels, with the first expected to be delivered to MARAD in early 2023. The Maritime Security Program, which encompasses 60 commercial vessels, remains the heart of Sustainment Sea Lift, and in addition, as has also been discussed, the newly funded Tanker Security Program will begin to address the need for more U.S. flag product tankers capable of transporting fuel to meet both national economic needs and the DoD's contingency requirements. We thank you very much for your support for the TSP in the NDAA. That said, meeting the DoD's sea lift needs requires not only vessels, but also qualified mariners. MARAD remains concerned about our ability to quickly assemble an adequate number of qualified mariners if an extended mobilization were to occur. We are especially mindful of the consequences of the pandemic on mariners. COVID has obviously made what were already very hard jobs harder, and we are concerned that some have decided to seek employment in less challenging environments. Further, it is critical that our merchant marine and indeed our entire maritime industry draw on the talents of all Americans who share a passion for the sea and for logistics. As such, all vessels and all maritime workplaces must uphold the essential values of mutual respect and dignity and ensure that all workers have an equal chance to excel on the basis of their competency and professionalism. Last year, we made the difficult decision to briefly pause the sea-air training aboard commercial vessels at the Merchant Marine Academy so we could institute new safety policies intended to help prevent sexual assault and harassment, support survivors, and strengthen a culture of accountability. In response to a request from members of Congress, we developed a program called Every Mariner Builds a Respectful Culture, or EMBARK. This program enumerates new safety requirements for vessels that carry Academy cadets. MARAD will not place cadets on commercial vessels that have not enrolled in EMBARK. We've also instituted new policies at the Merchant Marine Academy itself to improve the support we provide to our cadets at sea and to try to remove barriers to reporting when assault or harassment do occur. Cadet embarkations resumed in December of 2021, initially on training vessels and on vessels operated by the Navy, the Military Sea Lift Command, and the U.S. Coast Guard. We offer our deepest thanks to General Van Ovost, whom we were honored to host at the Academy last week, as well as to Admiral Mewborn and Admiral Wetlaufer, and to Admiral Schultz, the Coast Guard Commandant, as well as Rear Admiral John Mauger for their support of our midshipmen and our efforts to improve safety. With their assistance, we believe that all members of the Merchant Marine Academy class of 2023 should be able to accumulate the seat time needed to graduate on time. We also thank the Coast Guard for their extraordinary partnership in leading efforts to improve safety for mariners with the adoption of the new procedures in ship safety management plans. As of today, 5 commercial companies have enrolled in EMBARK, and I urge every U.S. flag carrier to enroll as quickly as possible. We know we have many miles to go, but through continuous process review, we will work to identify areas where our policies fall short and improve them. And we will support urgently needed culture change across the maritime industry. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you on the state of our nation's sea lift as a component of the mobility enterprise, and I ask that my written statement be entered into the record, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Without objection, your statement is entered. Again, as we now start questions, I just want to announce, unlike past meetings, we are going to institute a 5-minute rule for all members, including chairs and ranking members. We have a vote coming up, and lots of members here today, so we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask their questions. And that includes me, so you can start the clock running. I'd like to start with the Tanker Security Program. Obviously, as you both know, it was about a 3-year journey to get that to the President's desk that was signed a couple weeks ago. And it originated in our subcommittee. And I realize the ink's barely dry, but can you just kind of give us sort of an early preview about how you see implementation, particularly with the Red Hill developments?
So, Mr. Chairman, I will defer to MARAD on implementation, but let me talk a little bit about Red Hill. The validation of the military requirement for the Tanker Security Program came out of the 2021 study, which was done, did not have Red Hill in mind. the tanker security program ensures that we would have U.S. flagged, U.S. crews shipped in the Pacific to meet our needs. Separately, on the Red Hill plan, we'll be chartering 3 to 4 vessels to place fuel on the water, which gives us both a diverse capability as well as a dispersed capability in the Pacific. Having fuel on the water allows us to exercise and improve the readiness of our mariners by doing console operations, consolidated operations on the water, and testing out maybe lighterage operations so we could think about TSP in the future, is how to close some more gaps in the future in TSP. But again, those vessels are going to be long-term chartered separately from the TSP program.
Thank you so much, General. Thank you so much, General. So our plan is to do a rulemaking as quickly as possible and then begin the enrollments, and we hope to have these processes completed by the end of the calendar year.
That's great. It's faster than it took us. So, Administrator, I'd like to spend a minute just on, again, the national security maritime training vessels that are under construction at Philly Shipyard. I think an important aspect of that program is that the contracting model, which kind of eyes glaze over when you sort of start talking about that, but it really actually is a significant approach that MARAD took that I think is, again, showing good results. And maybe you could just sort of talk about that and whether or not that contracting model really could be applicable in terms of other, serial production for other types of vessels.
Thank you so much for the question. We are extraordinarily proud of the effort underway, and as you mentioned, it's a unique model. We use a vessel construction manager to oversee the construction at the yard, and that has enabled us to bring best commercial practices to bear. We also ensured that we had very mature designs. We are on track, currently under schedule, to receive the first NSMV, the Empire State, in April of 2023. The model is available and can certainly be adapted as needed to support other types of vessel construction. We certainly are continue to track very closely, but are, again, very pleased with it and would certainly offer this and any other technology or skill that we have to benefit the rate of recapitalization.
Great, thank you. And lastly, General, if you could just sort of give a general, we're in an unclassified setting, obviously, just sort of description of how things are going in Ukraine and whether we're meeting the demand to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm immensely proud of the men and women of Transportation Command and our industry partners and our National Guard and Reserve Forces who have all marshaled to support the effort in Ukraine. We work very closely with European Command as they integrate with the Ukraine and prioritize the needs of Ukraine so that we are able to ship and get it close to Ukraine and onward moved very quickly as we manage not only the nodes or the airports and seaports to get stuff there, but the people that work there and the flow in. So we're working very closely with UCOM to ensure that they can absolutely get that as quickly as possible.
Great. Thank you to both witnesses. And I'll recognize Mr. Whitman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll thank both of our witnesses. General Van Oost, I want to start out with talking about intra-theater connectors, and specifically in the Indo-PACOM. And it appears that in Indo-PACOM, those intra-theater connectors are going to allow us to operate in that contested space. Things like the Army watercraft, the Navy next generation connector ship, the Marine Corps light amphibious warship. All of those things are incredibly important. If you were to believe Admiral Aquilino and Admiral Davidson, which I do, they have stated that the risk is now and that intra-theater connectors are incredibly important to bridge the tyranny of distance, to be able to operate effectively in the Indo-PACOM. In your estimate, is there a deficit today as we speak with intra-theater logistics connectors, as I spoke of? And how essential are these programs in allowing logistics to flow in any of the COCOM's plans and any of the O plans, all the elements of things that you have to implement as part of your jurisdiction?
This is a critical question. Intra-theater movement is very important, especially the distances we're talking about in the Pacific and the fact that we will be under multi-domain attack, essentially, when we do this. And we foreshadowed it in our studies that came out last summer. We are in the midst of an intra-theater multimodal study for the Pacific. And in that study, we're looking at a mix of what it's going to take to move logistics around for all of the components. And that's agnostic of strategic or tactical airlift, surface lift, work with our allies and partners, and pre-positioning. And that study will come out this summer. But as a preview, we are short. We do believe that we would need more capability, especially with the lighterage type ships, as you spoke about, between what the services are purchasing, commercial lighterage type ships, and blue, I'll call foreign friendly force support, and a combination of that is what we will need in the Pacific to move fuel around.
Let me ask you about our bulk fuels for wartime reserves. Do you think that the Indo-PACOM wartime reserves are going to be available at the required quantity, at the required time, based on the framework that's been put in front of us on the closure of Red Hill?
Yes, this is also another good question, as Admiral Aquilino has laid out his posture and war reserve requests for the Indo-Pacific, which does require more, as we spoke about earlier, dispersed and diverse sources of fuel, for which the opportunity to take some fuel out of Hawaii and place it on the water, and also take some fuel out of there and place it forward closer to the point of need, we believe will actually reduce the risk that we have. The laydown was not calculated with respect to what was in Hawaii. We're certainly going to use it to our advantage.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Leslie, you spoke about having TSP ready to go, I think you said by September. There's also a rulemaking element that has to be part of that. Can you tell us, when do you anticipate finalizing the rules and fielding the Tenship tanker security program?
Great, thank you. Yes. So again, our hope is that we will have the rule finalized and begin the enrollment process this calendar year. We understand the urgency of it, but also, DOT is not the single actor in this process. But we will be moving as quickly as possible, again, with the goal of having the rule finalized and at least beginning the enrollment process, if not having completed that this calendar year.
Very good. General Van Ovos, can you tell us the importance of the Maritime Security Program to make sure that you have the capability to carry sustainment cargoes to support our warfighter and not having to rely on foreign carriers in a time of conflict to be able to accomplish that?
Thank you. As you know, our organic capabilities are insufficient to meet our military requirements around the globe, and we are absolutely inextricably linked. So the Maritime Security Program gives us that guaranteed access, and it is a great value for the dollar to ensure that we can have U.S. flagged, U.S. crewed ships available to support us into the future.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, I cannot compete with Joe Wilson's cell phone, so I'm going to yield back.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Garamendi, Chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several things. First, General Van Ovos, thank you very much for the continuing communication, particularly yesterday's communication. Ms. Leslie, the same. Thank you for your year of work, acting in the most extraordinary way to get the job done, and we thank you for that. A couple of things. I'm going to follow up on, again, what Mr. Whitman had brought up and what I discussed in my opening comments. The report to Congress on the long-range plan for construction of naval vessels for fiscal year 2022. You go into the look at it here, I think there's two roll-on, roll-offs that they're talking about here, and woeful shortage from what is needed and what would be built. bottom line is the Navy isn't going to build, pay for and build or own a sufficient quantity of logistical ships. And particularly, Mr. Whitman, the ships that you're talking about, those that are theater ships. The reality is that we have to find another way to do that, and we actually do have a way to do that, the MSP program. So my question to both of you is, could the MSP program contract beyond its current range of ships, which are mostly blue water ocean going, to move into those inter-theater ships that was discussed a few moments ago? So let's start with MARAD here, and then we'll go to the Transcom.
Thank you. My understanding is that there's a 60-vessel limit, so any kind of change would require a change in the authorizing statute.
Guess what we do? We change the law. So if the law were to be changed, could you go about contracting for other kinds of vessels that meet the intra-theater requirements?
We can certainly carry out any responsibilities that we are assigned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
General?
Yes, thanks. I will look to say that, any kind of capability to increase our ability to maneuver around in the Pacific would be helpful. We would have to take a look from a military necessity to see if more than 60 ships, what that number might be and what the return on investment might be. And we certainly, from an analytics standpoint, can support MARAD in that way. But again, I am a huge fan of MSP because we get great capability for very few dollars.
Exactly so. Very, very few dollars, probably a tenth or less of the cost of having the Navy to build them, and the Navy doesn't have the budget to build them anyway. So the other piece of this puzzle is the really stated in the goals and objectives of a stronger maritime nation. This was from the Department of Transportation, and specifically, the issues here go beyond just the ships. They go to the shipyards, to the mariners, to the totality of a maritime nation. We basically have lost our maritime nation. It's declined and continues to decline. We have an opportunity to rebuild it and to position the United States to have a robust maritime nation. Ms. Leslie, if you could speak to this report and how your organization might interact in meeting some of the objectives of the report.
The National Maritime Strategy you're speaking of was delivered in March of 2020 to Congress. We have a number of initiatives underway that are supporting near-term objectives. The TSP, obviously one of them. The initiation of our effort to recapitalize the Ready Reserve. Another thing laid out in there was expanding our educational opportunities. So last year we did designate 27 institutions.
I've got 30 seconds, so I'm just going to wrap up here. Thank you very much. We'll go into detail offline. Bottom line of this is, if we develop a national maritime security program that uses the Jones Act fleet, makes them militarily useful along with the current MSP program, we could do this at a fraction of the cost, and those ships would then be available when needed in an emergency or otherwise. I'm going to pursue this. I think there's support for that amongst the committees here. We simply have to meet the logistics requirement. We cannot do it today. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. Chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Waltz of the Readiness Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for everyone's questions. I share I share a lot of those concerns. General Van Ovos, I appreciate your engagement. I just want to spend a minute to continue our discussions on global household goods. And as we discussed, I'm hearing from industry, from associations, even from Ms. Megan Harless, who led in 2018 the change.org petition of so many service members with issues about the program. Even though she had issues with the program then, she doesn't like the direction it's going on top of industry and associations and others. And they're all ringing the alarm bells about the current construct of GHG and about the current awardee. And I think what underlies it, and I share the concern as we've discussed, is removing competition from our military moves. And I realize, and we've discussed that currently there's about 900 companies, but really it's about a handful that the government's actually dealing with that then subcontracts. But we're going from that construct to one single provider. And I think, members of this committee, as we see across the services, we see across combatant commands, I think we've seen time and time again the issue with going to one contractor, to one provider. I fear that this will become kind of the joint strike fighter of military moves, as I shared with you, where things take too long or overcost, and the government doesn't have a backup plan. So here's my concern and my question. And since 2018, when military members raised a lot of concerns, the customer satisfaction surveys have actually improved up to 94, 95%, which could always be better, but is pretty darn high. But the goal of the program, of the construct it is now with GHD, is to go back to 91% and then work its way back up to the mid-90s. And the awarded bidder has a customer satisfaction down in the 80s. We're at the same time going to be asking them to increase the amount of moves they're doing by 5-fold, while also increasing their customer satisfaction that currently is subpar. And so how does Transcom move forward with one company that served the smallest number of moves amongst the major companies that are currently moving at a higher cost with the lowest satisfaction rate? But help me square that circle.
Thank you for that question. I, too, am concerned for our members and their families, and we have got to get this right. But I'm confident in our solicitation and the structure of a single move manager as an integrator structure, right? Today, we lack the accountability necessary for our families and for Congress. And the structure we have now, and that we have set up, and that the GAO has reviewed very thoroughly, adds both carrots and sticks to the single move manager. And we have a continuous evaluation process for up to 28 metrics every month that we'll be able to foresee any concerns with the single move manager. And this not only gives us the insight we need to ensure accountability, it gives the transparency to our military members and their families. And while with any new contract there is risk, we have factored that risk into our transition plan very carefully, from the IT capability to capacity building, with checks along the way. The bottom line is, I fully am confident that this contract will provide the quality capacity that our service members and their family deserve, and that you have asked for.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, since we're time limited today. I just want to share with you, this is a bipartisan concern. I pulled up Chairman Garamendi's question to your predecessor about a year ago that asked about the lack of a contingency plan, the lack of a backup plan. We're not asking, the answer was we're not going back to the current construct. We're not asking that. I think what we're asking is, if this doesn't work, we plow ahead and it doesn't work as you hope it will, particularly with new IT systems being developed as well. We know how government IT goes. What's the backup plan? And since I'm out of time, I just want to ask that our teams explore those options. And will you work with me to explore some type of contingency? And we all know contingencies and backups are the hallmark of any type of prudent planning. Will you work with me on that, General?
I will.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Chair now recognizes Congresswoman Slotkin from Michigan.
Hi there. Thanks for being with us. And General Vanovo, great to see you again and have share a room with you again. You know, I guess I've been struck over the past almost year now how logistics have become sexy, right? Everybody's talking about logistics. Everybody's gotten religion on logistics, whether they're watching the Russians fail at some of the basics of logistics in Ukraine, whether you're from the private sector and you're suddenly really focused on logistics because of some of the supply chain anguish we've been having, the pullout of Afghanistan and watching the in extremis logistics that had to go on that no one felt proud of as we watched on TV. So I've really seen the conversation, or feel like the conversation has shifted, and it highlights what a great job we do on logistics, right? That it's not simple stuff. I guess what I've also seen is the rise of importance of the private sector in helping when needed to get things from point A to point B. So whether that was in Afghanistan, how private airline companies came and partnered with us to help when you needed to move folks over to Kabul, whether that's now the private sector helping us get humanitarian assistance to the borders with Ukraine, you know, whether it's humanitarian disasters, weather disasters. I just feel like there's going to be more and more partnership over the next 10 years where the military and the private sector are going to have to partner. So my question is, you know, we were talking about your experience in Afghanistan. Do you have all the authorities you need to bring in the private sector, the patriotic private sector, when we need them the most? And if not, what could we help you with to ease that ahead of need?
Thank you for recognizing that we could not do this without not just our private sector, but with our allies and partners who give us that access, spacing, and overflight to make the impossible probable. And especially as you spoke out to Afghanistan, I want to thank the emergency programs such as CRAF, our Civil Reserve Air Fleet. We actually activated CRAF Stage 1 almost seamlessly. And not only activated it, but deactivated it. We were very transparent with our commercial partners. They were very appreciative, and they came on and volunteered, and were very patriotic all throughout there. So I don't suspect we're going to see anything where we won't go together with our allies and partners and our industry. Indeed, in the first security cooperation deliveries for Ukraine was done by one of our commercial partners directly into Kyiv. So very proud of them. I have the authorities necessary as the Transcom commander to work and be transparent with our commercial partners. And then I go through the Secretary of Defense should I need to activate an emergency program. But I'm just so proud that our industry has been leaning forward and supporting us all the way.
So I would just say, if as you continue to do your job around the world, you feel like there are things where ease of administration would help you, please come to us before the need. You know, we'll always be here if there's a real crisis, but it's always better to practice and execute those authorities before we're in a crisis. And then lastly, we talked very, very briefly about the theater of the Arctic, right? And we know that that's a very difficult, the geography there is very, very difficult. In light of Russia invading Ukraine and given how much territory they have above the Arctic Circle, can you paint us a picture of what it's like doing logistics in the Arctic?
Certainly, that is an area of concern. I've been working very closely with Northcom on the plans for defense of the Arctic area. And in general, power projection is a little harder, but we've been doing exercises with the command on how to support it. We support it generally from the United States as we project forward. And so I'm happy with the progress we're making, but it's not done yet. There's some posture that we'll be working on with Northcom into the future.
Yeah, I would just say that we've all, I think, probably been happy that the Arctic hasn't been a place of military tension, but I think we in this committee and in general in Congress need to be thinking more about that becoming a more difficult space to operate, just given the Russian interests up there. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Slack. And the chair now recognizes Congressman Kelly from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. General Ovost, I'm from Mississippi, and we proudly have the C-17 Globemaster 3s and the 172nd Air Wing in Jackson. We also have KC-135s, the 186th Wing in Meridian, Mississippi, which is very close to my hometown. Both of those are backbone. I want to echo Ranking Member Waltz's thing about the global household goods contract. I echo his sentiments on that. I also don't, just because all my questions are going to be about C-17s and KC-135s, I understand there's 70% in our maritime fleet, and I want to echo what Mr. Whitman and others have said about our maritime fleet and making sure we have the capacity to do the job that we need in-time logistics, not just in-time logistics, so that we're prepared for that. On the C-17s, I know a lot of our foreign partners, these guys have been our workload in Afghanistan, again in Ukraine, and a lot of our international partners are getting state-of-the-art digital analytics capabilities in their C-17s. We have a project going on at Joint Base McGuire to see how that works here and how it affects that. Assuming that this pilot is successful at McGuire Air Force Base, how does that affect the other 222 C-17s throughout our fleet in making sure that they have those capabilities to work in a contested environment?
Thank you, Congressman. Again, I reiterate, our friends from Mississippi have been doing great work, and I rely on the expertise of the Guard and Reserve, that they've been bringing it really strong when it comes to innovation and support for these aircraft, especially as they age. And as you said, the C-17, the ability to immediately deploy combat power is a strategic comparative advantage that no one else has. So while as I won't talk about the Air Force, but I do know in my previous role that what we do is we take successful pilot programs and expand them as fast as possible. And again, through the Guard and Reserve, that's the fastest way we can expand across the fleet.
And I just, you know, sometimes we want to change Guard units and their missions, and I'm not hearing any of that talk, but I caution you against that. I will tell you, it's not just the pilots and the experience that we lose with pilots, and whether they're KC-135s or C-17s, but those maintenance crews are better than anything you can ever have on active duty because of the longevity that they do those missions. And so we don't need to change those things when we don't have to, when we're talking about refueling or C-17s, because if we do, we lose all that maintenance experience as well as the pilot experience. Talk a little bit about the KC-146 remote vision system. We've had our issues with that. We're still working through those. The identified solution is not available until FY 2024. And during that time, do we have sufficient aerial refueling capacity to allow retirement of legacy tankers in FY 22 and 23?
Yeah, great. We just completed a study, mobility capability requirement study, and as I look at the total capacity of air refueling now that the KC-46 is a bit delayed coming online, we are at elevated risk should we have multiple wartime demands, or so-called stacked demands on this aircraft. However, there are mitigation opportunities that I'm working with the combatant commanders on. And indeed, now that the new National Defense Strategy has come out, we are taking a relook at the requirements for air refueling, especially when we think about refueling in a contested environment and in the Pacific. So today, I can meet our wartime demands.
I just ask, you know, and I know anytime we divest and get new capabilities, it's a sliding risk scale of what you give up. I just think the world environment that has changed in the last month or 6 weeks with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I just hope we relook that. And I don't know what the right answer is, and I know you guys, that's what you get to do as senior level commanders, is manage that risk for the nation. But and I trust you to do that. I just want to make sure we're looking at those. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. The chair now recognizes Mr. Norcross from New Jersey.
Thank you, Chairman. General, I follow up on the question concerning the 135s, but he talked about the next 2 years. I want to talk about a little bit further out when the current buy of 179 KC-46s end, yet we still have the 135. what are your plans for replacing 135 past that? It's a couple of years old. In fact, most of the maintainers weren't born when that came online. Can you give us some clarity on that?
Okay, thank you. The KC-46 is the first step in our refueling capitalization program. As you mentioned, the contract for 179 will still have the KC-135, which then would be an average of 46 years old. So it's important that we continually recap that. So we're working with the Air Force on what the future requirements of an air refueling platform might be. Now, the KC-46 does have some key capabilities that I would like to see going into the future. It's part of the network, it's connected, and it can do more. It's a multimodal, it can do drogue and probe stiff boom refueling. So as we create the requirements, we'll be working with the Air Force on what we expect to be a continuous recapitalization program of the refueling fleet.
Thank you. So from the sky, I want to move it back down to earth. Red Hill's retiring, the plan moving more diversified, more forward, and we support that single point of failure that Red Hill could be at some point. But now we're putting all this fuel at sea. We have the tanker security program. Can you touch base a little bit on what the security protocols and posture of those tankers floating around in open ocean, not only from those who do us harm from nations, but from terrorists?
Certainly, the chartered tankers, the long-term chartered tankers, are going to have about 30 million gallons, which is about 3% of the reserve requirement for Indo-PACOM for their needs. So it's a small percentage. But importantly, it is diverse. It is going to be on the move. It is much harder to target something on the move than it is in a fixed location on a certain land area. And so an on-the-move target, I think, is one way. The other way is the fact that we have many diverse locations with respect to land-based. So again, diversifying more towards the south and east. And for the rest, I would like to either take that for the record or go to a classified session.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. Chair now recognizes Mr. Gallagher from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Vanovos, last year I asked your predecessor a series of questions about the near-term readiness of our strategic lift capabilities to sustain the fight over Taiwan in 2025, not 2045. The response I got at the time was that we had to wait for the then forthcoming China Task Force report and the Global Posture Review, that would provide better insight. Those reviews have since been completed. The National Defense Strategy has been transmitted in classified fashion to this committee. So I'd like to ask some of those same questions, starting with just when you look across the maritime lift enterprise, to the extent you can talk about this in an open session, how does our current capacity stack up against what we would need to fight and win if we had to go to war in the Indo-Pacific tomorrow?
I think, as alluded to earlier, we have an aging sea lift fleet. And with the Ready Reserve Force at 46 years old, the reliability is less than we would like it. So when I think about total capacity, I think about that and our ability to contract capability into the Pacific. So right now today, while I'm concerned, I think that we can meet the mark today, but we have to continue to focus on ensuring that the ships will be available when we need them and that they will remain reliable throughout a conflict on the maritime side.
So how, I mean, the bottom line is what would be the biggest gaps that concern you if we're thinking on a 2025 timeline?
So the biggest gaps I see with respect to just ensuring that we have the total square footage that's necessary and that we have the mariners that are necessary, which is why the maritime industry is so important to us as a maritime nation. We will need their expertise as they've come in peace and war to support us. We want to make sure that we can still recruit and retain our great maritime warriors.
So how can Congress best help fill those gaps on that timeline? Is it just a question of funding? Is it the Maritime Security Program? What are the ways where we can fill the gaps?
I'll speak to my part, and I'll pass it to MARAD. But certainly, sea lift recapitalization on a schedule that ensures that we're able to replace the current ships that are unreliable with ships that we can continue to use and have a high reliability, and then over to MARAD.
I actually would totally agree with the General. I mean, DoD sets the requirements, but we will continue the recapitalization as quickly as we can. As we discussed, there's a limit right now on the number of ships that we can buy. We're authorized, but we're contingent on an action by Navy to buy more than 4 right now. So we're actively engaged in buying the next 2, but actions outside of our control have to happen before we can continue the purchases.
Is our present network of bases and alliances in the Indo-Pacific optimized for our maritime lift needs in support of both the blunt and contact layers?
Congressman, I'll have to get back to you on optimization as the Indo-PACOM commander has come up with a new 2B posture. That answer would be in the classified realm, so I'd like to be able to take that and get back to you.
How does the closure of Red Hill potentially impact our fuel reserves and our demands in the Pacific?
The closure of Red Hill does not really affect our fuel reserves. In fact, Red Hill is not fueled to the maximum amount. Over time, we have been reducing the fuel out of Red Hill and positioning it to more favorable locations.
So last year, when I asked your predecessor about our ability to respond to and sustain a war over Taiwan in a way that gives us physical, psychological, and temporal advantage was the phrase your predecessor used. I think I didn't really get necessarily a response. I mean, I guess what I'm driving at is if the proverbial stuff were to hit the fan tomorrow over Taiwan, what would be our biggest shortfalls? And what would be our ability to sustain that war? And I only have 14 seconds, so you may be able to run the clock out on me.
Yes, certainly this is about contested logistics and our ability to maneuver with the force and provide the capabilities they need on the timing and tempo that they need. And we're doing various things to try to get after those gaps right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. The chair now recognizes Mr. Langevin, who's on the screen.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine, Jim.
Very good. Thank you. I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony today. I'll begin, if I could, with General Van Oost. General, Transcom's Sea Fleet is obviously a critical component of transporting equipment across the world. However, Military Sea Lift Command relies heavily on agreements with commercial partners to provide sea lift capabilities. Obviously, these partners are vulnerable to cyber attacks, which is deeply concerning to me and to my colleagues, especially due to the Russian Federation's potential for offensive cyber operations. So I wanted to ask, how are you working with these commercial partners to ensure that they are bolstering their cyber defenses? And are you prepared to respond in coordination with U.S. Cyber Command to any cyber intrusions that may occur?
Thank you for bringing up this critical question. Cyber operations absolutely pose significant threat to logistics and supply chains, and cyber attacks will slow and degrade our ability to continue to move forces forward when necessary. So when working with our commercial partner, we have a number of initiatives with them. We are now they're doing self-assessments on their cyber readiness and then providing them to us on a year-to-year basis, and we are watching that get better and better. Indeed, these cyber assessments are being briefed out to their C-suite level, so we know that they are focused on this concern. We also have been working several pilot programs with Cybercom and CISA to share intelligence and threat information across to our transportation service providers. But we know it's not going to be one and none. We are going after persistent threat within our cyber realm, and we always have to be on alert So we will continue to leverage these programs coming out of Cybercom and CISA and ensure that our transportation service providers have access to them to improve their cybersecurity.
Thanks. So let's drill down just a minute on that, the self-assessment. What are we doing in terms of third-party validators to ensure that those assessments, are worth more than just the paper they're written on? What type of red teaming do they need to do as they're doing these self-assessments? I can relate. Remember early on in my career when I first started doing a deep dive on cyber, and I wanted to know how secure we are in terms of our critical infrastructure, like our electric grid. And I was told everything's fine. We've got this, and clearly they did not, and we were really underprepared as a country. What are you doing in terms of validating these self-assessments? And what does that mean? What does a self-assessment entail?
Certainly, thank you. We are running a pilot program for Cyber Command, the first one to try those third-party assessments. We have completed one, and we're just about to complete the second one, and a third one is ongoing. For the first one, it was one of our partners, our large industry partners, and they did very well. In other words, it matched what their self-assessment was, this third-party look. And we are shoring up our tactics, techniques, and procedures right now, and we're going to continue to do that. So I'm heartened by the fact that they're taking it seriously and that a third party can objectively look at it and declare the same.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you could offer in terms of steps that you're taking to make sure that Transcom itself as a whole is more resilient to cyber intrusions and continuously evaluating your cyber readiness?
Thank you. That is one of my top priorities. We have a number of initiatives going on with Cybercom for the U.S. Transcom network. With first respect to hygiene, we are moving to the cloud very aggressively. We are the pilot project for Cybercom to enable zero trust on one of our networks, and we're trying to harden our terrain and essentially modernize so that we can secure our terrain.
Very good. Those are a helpful list of things you identified. Those are moving in the right direction. I see that my time is almost expired, so also with the other question I have for the record, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Langevin. The chair now recognizes Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Leslie, it's not often that we have somebody from the Department of Transportation in this committee, so I'm glad you're here. I know we've been talking about the value of the cadets at Kings Point, the service that comes out of Kings Point. I want to point out to you that there's a significant difference in the way a cadet at Kings Point is treated, may not be the right word, but than any of the other service academies. And my understanding is that a midshipman at the Naval Academy, for example, receives $1,185 a month to help pay the cost. They receive insurance, where at Kings Point, I don't believe they receive the stipend or the insurance. Is that correct?
I don't know about the stipend. I'm going to have to take that for the record.
Okay. I know I'm correct on the insurance. My suggestion to the Department of Transportation would be that if we want more merchant mariners, that we should find some equilibrium between the way the cadets are treated, or the midshipmen are treated at the Merchant Marine Academy, and they're treated at the Naval Academy or at the Coast Guard Academy or any of the other academies. I just, as we have our discussions with candidates, that's an issue. And we only have about 280 a year that are actually admitted to the Merchant Marine Academy. So if we invest $25,000 a year per plebe, midship, whatever the proper terminology is, it's just simply not that much money for us as a country, and the investment that we make, I think, would be a very good one, and I would encourage you to look at that and look forward to further discussions with you on that. So I would appreciate if you would commit to look at that and get back to us on that.
Certainly.
All right. General, I have 31 law enforcement agencies in the state of Georgia that are ready to donate over 2,200 vests with body armor to the people fighting in Ukraine. I'm told through the National Guard Bureau that they believe that they could accumulate as many as 10,000 vests for the people that are currently fighting in the Ukraine. Is it possible for Transcom to get those vests to the people on the front line defending Ukraine?
First of all, I applaud them for trying to help out Ukraine. And there is a planning cell that is taking donations and working them to get them to Ukraine. And what we can do is pass you the information for that cell.
Yes, ma'am. I would appreciate the further information because I know there are a lot of people in our National Guard and in our law enforcement. Many times they are the same people that are ready, willing, and able to send that excess inventory to people that are fighting for freedom, and we want to get that to them as soon as possible. One other question about transport. My understanding is that we have 643 T-72 tanks in various NATO inventories. They're ready to use, they're easy to maintain. Ukrainians should be able to operate them. If we wanted to get those tanks to Ukrainians, does Transcom have the needed airlift and sea lift to backfill?
Yes, Congressman. So moving tanks around is what we do with our commercial industry partners. So if European Command and the administration is authorized to move some tanks out of Europe and needs to be replenished, we absolutely would be able to support with that, and we would work with the Army on what they would need.
Thank you. My time is almost expired. Ms. Leslie, I'm very serious about the way we handle the Merchant Marine Academy. I think that would be money well spent to equalize, if you will, the way we treat the men and women that go to Kings Point with the other academies.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We will
Thank
get
you.
to get back
I
to you.
yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Spear, who's on the screen, is next from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for presenting to us today. Let me start with General Van Ost. Given that most of our partners for sea lift capabilities are in the civilian sector and don't have the appropriate communication security measures in place, what has Transcom done to reduce the risk of intercept or other intrusions in the sea lift communications?
Thanks for that question. We are working with our military Sea Lift Command to provide, when necessary, carry-on secure communications, as well as our tactical advisors, our tactical officers, which are essentially our merchant mariners, to support them should they need for tactical maneuvering or to do communications or move intelligence to support their movements.
So do we have any evidence of hacking going on in the communications areas of these entities?
So I would have to get back to you in a classified setting to provide that information.
All right, thank you. We're now 4 years past acknowledging the legacy moving program is a failure, yet a new contract is still not in place. I serve as chair of the Military Personnel Subcommittee and Mr. Gallagher as ranking member, and we do hear from families, especially during COVID, that there were not crews to pick up their household goods or that the goods never showed up. These families were told that they had to just move their belongings themselves or plan for their stuff to be moved after they left the local area. So what has Transcom done to prevent this from happening in the upcoming move season?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, COVID is absolutely demonstrated, the labor shortage has demonstrated the current flaws in the current program. And that's something that if with a multi-year contract, a single integrator, hopefully, you know, there would be a quality capacity available, and we'd be able to manage that capacity better so that we wouldn't have to tell people to do your own move yourself. So while the GAO ruled completely favorably towards Transcom and towards the allotting of this contract, we are in the Court of Federal Claims now, so it'll be another 6 months before we can begin the process with this contractor. In the meanwhile, we're not waiting. We are doing things like enhancing communications, making claims easier, giving options to our family members on when they can get pickups and deliveries, giving them better transparency, and removing personally identifiable information from these slips when we have to go overseas, which is normally part of the customs process. So we are trying to hit after every pain point possible just to relieve our families from any burden.
Well, it sounds like they're going to go through another move season in which they're going to be held responsible for moving their own belongings. Is that right?
There is still a labor shortage, but we will do everything we can to ensure that the current contractors can provide capacity for the move season. But the labor shortage affecting the economy is also affecting the move industry.
All right, thank you. Ms. Leslie, the Merchant Marine Academy cruises are now back on the sea year, and we've been very troubled by the reports of sexual assault and sexual abuse on the among the Academy students. So you do have a new reporting system in place. Can you tell us about it? Is it working? And are there safe options for reporting and ensuring that victims are able to access services?
Thank you. So we've made a number of changes. First, as we talked about, we've put new requirements on the carriers commercial carriers that carry our cadets. We've also instituted a new superintendent's instruction at the academy and revised our sea year guide. We've also given satellite phones that enable voice communication to every cadet at sea. In terms of, we still have the same process of restricted and unrestricted reporting. That hasn't changed. We are confident that these measures will improve safety. However, we have built into all of them a process of continuous review and improvement. We've engaged a subject matter expert to come and look at the Embark program, and we'll continue to engage experts and seek opportunities to make improvements wherever possible. By no means are these measures the final ones. They are just steps in what is going to have to be a continuous process of removing barriers. And there have been too many barriers, and I'm convinced that there are still barriers to reporting. We are committed to doing that, and it is a primary focus for me and for the entire Maritime Administration.
Ms. Leslie, my time has expired, but I would appreciate the opportunity to meet with you privately to go over more information and more data that we have uncovered.
I would welcome that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Wilson from South Carolina.
Thank you very much, Chairman Courtney, and thank both of you for your service. General Van Vost, I'm grateful that the Air Force sustainers at Joint Base Charleston, South Carolina, who bolster the ability to project power across the globe through substantial airlift capability. We appreciate that Joint Air Base Charleston maintains one of the largest fleets of C-17 aircraft in the Air Force, providing a significant portion of Air Mobility Command's global reach airlift capacity. How vital is the C-17 platform to meet Transcom's mission requirements? Is the Air Force fleet of C-17s sufficient to meet Transcom's demands for airlift logistics?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I tell you, at Charleston, the men and women of the air wings there have performed admirably. They are the first ones we call when we need something overnight. Whether it was their work in Afghanistan for the retrograde or whether it was in Ukraine, we use them extensively. So thank you for the great experience aviators that you have there and maintainers. They are amazing. As I said, they answer the call every day. I look at the fleet. It provides the immediate force. I mean, it is the deterrent force for our nation. So keeping that aircraft healthy is a focus of mine. But when I look at the mobility capability requirements study, it shows that we do have the aircraft that we need, but we have been flying them a lot. So we do need to be thinking about how would we recapitalize such a great aircraft. And I'm working with the Air Force on what those requirements might look like.
And I would, it's personal. I actually would go to the Charleston Air Force Base when I was growing up for Kids Day. And so they would have young people see the capabilities there. And it's heartwarming when I see the Palmetto State flag around the world and the very capable people. And my dad is an Air Force veteran. It really has great meaning. And Ms. Leslie, I was very grateful to visit our NATO allies in Bulgaria and Romania last summer as part of a congressional delegation. With our current forward deployed troop presence in Novo Selo training area and MK Air Base, the strategic ports of Varna in Bulgaria and Constanta in Romania are of vital importance to our logistics chain. With the murderous presence of the Putin warships in the Black Sea, what are the limitations on commercial vessels and how does it affect the deployment and sustainability in the region?
I think I'm gonna have to take that question back. You know, in a general sense, we put out guides to mariners about certain areas and risks that are involved there. And we do have some vessels underway right now supporting DoD operations, but I will get back to you on the specific question that you've asked.
I can just add on the Department of Defense requirements. I can't speak to the civilian requirements moving civilian goods, but from a Department of Defense perspective, we have not really been affected by the activities in the Black Sea with respect to moving the force. So we've been able to maneuver around the current areas of operation.
Well, having visited Novo Selo and MK Air Base a number of times, it's really so encouraging and inspiring. The people of Bulgaria would love to see Varna developed. The people of Romania would like to see Constanta. And how important the Black Sea, sadly, is today. And then, General, the disastrous surrender with 13 Americans murdered, leaving Americans behind in Afghanistan, ceded control of strategic bases to the murderous Taliban. Both Bagram and Kabul were major stopover locations capable of landing and servicing C-17s on worldwide missions. How has our ability to transport equipment and personnel been limited across CENTCOM without these bases?
Congressman, we have not been limited because we are not flying in and through Afghanistan. It is a landlocked nation, and we do not have a lot of airways that we require to move U.S. military capability through. Our routes in and through Central Command are robust and distributed.
Is there any potential for a base, say, in India?
Gentleman's time.
But whatever.
Expired.
Thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Chair now recognizes Mr. Banks from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, Admiral Richard at Stratcom recently described the importance of things like EMP hardening for future tankers, given that China and Russia are both nuclear-armed states. Based on evolving threats to aerial refueling operations, what are your top priorities for capability and capacity for the future aerial refueling fleet?
Thank you for that question. I think about that a lot with respect to a contested environment and what we need to be successful at Echelon in a contested environment. And what that takes is we need to make sure our platforms are connected into the network, that they can see the battle so that they become more survivable and they can make decisions at Echelon knowing the scheme of maneuver. At Transportation Command, we used to just deploy the force and sustain the force. Now we have to deploy the force, sustain the force, and maneuver the force because of the contested environment. So all of our platforms, whether that's air or surface, need to be connected, and we need to be connected in a secure way.
Over the past year, the KC-46 has been cleared to take on more operational taskings from Transcom and is now able to refuel 70% of all the receivers in the DoD inventory. Do you expect to clear more receivers for operational refueling this year, General?
And Jesus, I work with our Air Component Air Mobility Command. They have cleared all of the F-22 and F-35 fifth gen, so they are at 85% clear. In addition, they are doing exercises around the world to exercise our logistics chain and ensure that they can mobilize in the small packages and generate receiving tanker capability while they're forward. So I am heartened by the exercising that they're doing. They're also providing some capacity to Transcom on a day-to-day basis to do refueling. I think this is the fastest way to fully operationally capable by having the crews get out there and do reps and sets on that aircraft.
To what degree would you say that the KC-46 is now helping to relieve stress on the air refueling fleet?
The KC-46 has been doing what we call coronets, which is taking fighter aircraft around the world, and they've also been doing quite a bit of the air refueling inside and doing some exercise at places like Red Flag and up in Alaska. So again, getting reps and sets on how we would actually fly the airplane in combat is what they've been doing. That has been offloading our KC-135s and KC-10s so that those can actually deploy forward, say into the CENTCOM AOR or into the EUCOM AOR to do deployments forward.
In your written testimony, you highlighted the importance of continuing to replace Eisenhower-era KC-135s with the KC-46. The current KC-46 program will buy 179 aircraft. That 179 tanker will be delivered in 2029. By that time, hundreds of KC-135s may still be flying at an average age of 70 years old. Is it your expectation that the 180th modern tanker, whatever it may be, will start delivering as soon as the current program of record completes?
We've been working with the Air Force on a recapitalization plan that will ensure that we can continue to recapitalize, because we recognize that a 70-year-old aircraft is very hard to maintain and the reliability on the road will not be good. So we are working with the Air Force on the requirements for the follow-on tanker, if you will. We would hope, and as you'll see in the budget, that they have placed some money to try to take a look at that future refueler.
Would you say there's a sense of urgency to do that?
I would say there's a sense of urgency, yes.
Last July, the House Armed Services Committee heard testimony that the threat from manned portable air defense systems, known as MANPADS, is proliferating. 1 month later, we saw coalition transport aircraft deploying counter-missile defensive flares over Kabul. And now we're witnessing a significant inflow of thousands of MANPADS into Ukraine. General, can you characterize the state of the MANPADS threat facing Transcom airlift assets such as C-130s and C-17s, and the importance of developing new protection technologies for those systems such as engine infrared suppressors?
Yes, the contested environment does include surface-to-air and MANPADS, and I think about every day where our aircraft go and what threats that they face. So as we assess where they go, we ensure that they have the capabilities required to defeat that threat, as we do a very thorough risk assessment with the type of mission. And we in place many mitigating areas that in case to reduce the overall risk. That said, new capabilities like our large aircraft IR countermeasure systems are a key measure that we want to have in our aircraft in the future.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. The chair now recognizes Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. I think it's very clear, and particularly what's going on with the Ukrainian conflict, that logistics is vital to the warfighter. I'm encouraged by some of the failures we've seen from the Russian side. I'm also encouraged by the investments that we're trying to make. We're not there yet, but I am encouraged to see us, the Transcom and MARAD have been making investments. But we will continue to, we will continue to. I have it on good authority. The gentleman from Alabama will also be talking about the KC-46. But I'm not going to delve into this. I would like to highlight the efforts of the 151st Air Refueling Wing out of Roland R. Wright National Guard Base in Utah, and dovetailing off of my colleague from Indiana. The KC-46 is failing to meet expectations in terms of delivery, performance, and capability. Growing pains are expected from any new platform, but we cannot continue to ignore the role the KC-135 will continue to play across our global combatant combats, particularly for the National Guard. The KC-135 must bridge the gap between full integration of a fully operational KC-46. At the 151st, they have used their own money from their National Guard and Reserve equipment account to implement groundbreaking and innovative modernizations to the KC-135. They're taking this on themselves. Due to their creativity, ingenuity, and foresight, the 151st has the first tanker to be on the link with the Advanced Battle Management System and the first to possess the ability to connect with other combat platforms. They are continuing to work on other modernizations to improve fuel efficiency and give the KC-135 the ability to buy back airspace in a contested environment. Best of all, these essential modernizations are directly transferable to the KC-46 when the KC-135 is eventually retired. This is a gap. They are working to fill this gap and modernize to make it a more effective aircraft that can be transferred to the KC-146. My question, and General Van Olvost, what has your team done to complement modernization efforts on the KC-135, and do you support further modernization funding to help bridge this gap between the 46 and the 135?
Thanks. You've hit on a key point. We must continue to modernize the KC-135 today to make it more relevant and resilient in the contested environment. As I spoke briefly earlier, the most important for the survivability is to ensure that they're on that network. And so the innovative and amazing airmen from your wing that have come up with ideas on how to put together a Link 16 and bring it onto the aircraft for the first time that we then used in exercises it has been very, very helpful. And as I talked to my air component about how do we expand that and get it very quickly, and I call it MacGyvering, how do we just get it on the airplane and get it into the hands of the air crew so that they can improve their tactics, techniques, and procedures. And really, this is where I think our Guard and Reserve really bring it strong with respect to innovation. And so I appreciate the Guard using their NGRIA funds to do this testing and training, and I appreciate them thinking about fuel efficiency. Again, many of those folks work or maintain airline aircraft, and they understand fuel efficiency and the ways to get after it.
Are you aware of any test efforts to keep the 135 operable in a contested environment?
I am. As I said, the contested environment is here right now. And there are numerous modifications that Air Mobility Command is trying to place into the KC-135. This is a little bit of a matter of scale with the number of airplanes that they would have to modify, but they are trying to not only make the airplane more relevant and survivable, but frankly, there are areas where parts obsolescence are a problem, and they've got to go after just replacing stuff that they can't fix anymore. So it is a large modernization program, but they're working it very hard.
And just to kind of drive this point home, because I know you're not going to be able to give me an exact dollar figure on what you'd be willing to support right here. Mm-hmm. But back to this concept of can we further support modernization funding? Like what are the key biggest challenges to being able to find a way to do that? Because we recognize the problem, we recognize we have a very talented and engaged leadership team in Salt Lake City. Congressman Stewart and I work closely with this group. It's an honor to serve them, and you're right, they're taking it on their own. What are just a couple key challenges that are going to keep us from being able to modernize here?
I think that as I work with the air component on the ability to get the funds for those modernization packages for the KC-135 just to keep it going. And then again, I appreciate the efforts of the team from Utah as they bring it strong in the innovation world. They're doing their own tests and engineering. We're doing our very best in the Air Force with Wright-Patterson to get the engineering capacity to them so we can leverage their knowledge.
I welcome you to visit. I'll be there to greet you and hope that you'd be willing to accept that invitation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Chair now recognizes Mr. Bergman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would associate with several of my colleagues' comments here on the concern over the household goods situation. General, what I heard you say was there was previously to a level a lack of accountability, so then therefore hire an integrator. I guess my question was, does this move to hire an integrator, does that insulate your bureaucracy even hard for me to say, your bureaucracy from being held accountable?
Congressman, I am accountable for global household goods.
But you will be gone in a period of time, and your bureaucracy will be intact. And I appreciate you're willing to be held accountable. And I think as commanders, we have to look long-term, past our time in command. And there are no easy decisions here. But I guess I would, I'd like to hear you and others say, I will make sure that when I'm gone, and someone else takes the command, that the bureaucracy that they're inheriting feels a sense of urgency and accountability for whatever that mission is, because in the end, we can't have a ready force without the families being adequately taken care of, because then that relieves the stress on that deployed member of that family to get the job done. So, Ms. Leslie, did I understand correctly, you referred to a couple of times the Navy plan for building ships or getting an okay from the Navy? Can you kind of put a little meat on that bone for me as far as what that really means? Quickly, because we've only got 3 minutes here. I mean, what does that really mean for the Navy to control your shipbuilding?
Well, we're authorized to buy 9 total ships, but we can't buy more than 4 until the Navy submits a plan for new build.
So is that an optimal, going back not necessarily to bureaucracies and how we're set up, is that optimal? I mean, are you have to jump through more hoops than you would like to have the Navy okay it?
Well, it's not the Navy okay, it's just that we're, I guess coupled is the word, our Navy has to take an action and then we can take an action.
If the
I would not opine on the
If the gentlelady would suspend for 1 second to answer Mr. Bergman's question. Yeah. Actually, it was an act of Congress that said that the Navy needs to send over a new build plan by 2028.
So we can change that.
We can, but on the other hand, we can also have a very good discussion about the fact that many of us believe that we should do both. We should be buying used, but there should be a new build plan. And frankly, there's been a lot of frustration about the fact that that has not happened.
Thank you for bringing it.
Yes, and I won't count your time against you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Lastly, on a different subject, but it goes along. If we're going to have ships, no matter who builds them or who okays it, is the Merchant Marine Academy optimally structured to educate the future merchant mariners, if that's an appropriate term, the men and women who will man these ships, in some cases potentially maybe design ships or looking forward to or connect them, as the general said, are to ensure their, number one, their ability to operate in a contested environment, but their ability to evolve, if you will, with the future fight. Because in the end, you can build machines and ships, but you also have to prepare the men and women to sail them.
Thank you so much for that question. Another congressional requirement, actually, in the NDAA was that the National Academy of Public Administration do a study of the Merchant Marine Academy to examine the question that you just raised, and this is a very small part of that study here. We have a number of challenges at the Merchant Marine Academy, those that we are trying to work through right now. One is infrastructure. There are just suboptimal infrastructure components at the Academy. We are, and I know time is short, but we're trying to establish at the Academy the ability to manage projects using project management discipline so that when we invest taxpayer resources, we get what we expect.
Let me ask you just in a slightly different way. Is what we're trying to do putting positive Band-Aids on it, or is it time to really take a real relook at the Merchant Marine Academy and see, can we actually look at it going forward? Is that part of the
It's absolutely.
study?
So just to enumerate quickly, infrastructure is an issue, sexual assault and harassment is an issue, diversity, equity, inclusion is an issue. But to your point, The curriculum is extremely compressed. It's probably, the report recommends that we examine whether it should move to a 5-year curriculum so that we can not only do what needs to be done to ensure that they graduate with their licenses, but to prepare them for the evolutions of technology and the environment and for serving in a contested environment. We're setting up a task force, as was recommended by the report and required by the NDAA, to help us look at those questions. I think those are the absolute right questions to be asking. We're fundamentally committed to making sure that we address the challenges and that we position them to meet the nation's
You know,
needs
you're
going
making
forward.
me look bad because you're going over my time.
No, no.
And I'm going to get challenged by the chairman here. So I appreciate the detailed answer because they deserve that if they're going to be our future leader.
If the chairman will indulge, I completely agree with you, and I feel extraordinarily passionate about this. The midshipmen who are there are extraordinary Americans who've chosen a life of service, but we need to ensure that the academy, its facilities, its programs, and its education prepare them for that life of service and meet the service that they're giving to the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for going over.
No apologies necessary. And again, just for the record, the acting administrator worked on the Hill under Congressman Cummings and did oversight on military academies. So she is actually the absolute perfect person to be on the job to address this issue. Chair now recognizes Mr. Carl from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for both of you for joining us today. I appreciate it. In general, I appreciate the service y'all are giving us over in Ukraine. And we should be very proud of that. Thank you. And history will record that. My question is to you, none of the KC-46s, let me repeat that, 0 of the KC-46s are fully mission capable, and we've only had 56 of the 179 that we ordered actually delivered, so they're well behind in production. I'm frustrated about this plane, and I want to be very honest. I know it's not your bailiwick, but I'm obviously coming to a point here. These planes can't be used for refueling so many of our aircraft. You're saying 85%. Well, that 85%, if I'm in the other 15% and I'm up in the air, that makes a huge difference. So we're having to rely more and more on these KC-10s and KCs-135, and I think it's embarrassing for this country to have a 60-year-old plane to put a crew in that plane to risk their life to go up to refuel these planes. I think it is just off the scale, and we need to do more about it. There's more of a demand now for the air refueling, considering the Indo-Pacific situation we're in, than we currently have available. So my question to you, General, is this. In your opinion, can the A330s greater play a role in the payload and in the range fitting what TRANSCOM needs, refueling needs, and maybe get our warriors what they actually need to service our airmen?
You've hit on a passionate point for me as well. Air refueling is the backbone of global mobility and our ability to project and sustain and employ a joint force around the world, bomber task forces, fighter forces. So it is a critical capability that we must have. And so we absolutely need a plan to continue to recapitalize those aging aircraft, beyond the KC-46 current contract. Now, we'll leave it to the Air Force to determine the capacity and capabilities as we will try to define the requirements for them. I'll leave it to them to work an acquisition plan. But rest assured, we are keeping our eye on the capabilities and capacity we need in the future contested environment, not simply what we're just doing today.
So how has the 330 performed for you so far?
We do not have the A330 in our inventory, but I am aware that it's flying with other nations.
Right, exactly, which we're refueling behind.
Which I understand U.S. aircraft are refueling behind.
Thank you. Another quick question for you. The majority of the military Sea Lift Command fleet is over 40 years old. We're all here. We know that. Congress has not been provided an adequate shipbuilding plan. The current plan does not reflect what we need over the next 30 years. And I'm disappointed that the plan was not delivered within the budget. In your current position, this must be frustrating for you, I'm sure, if anyone. So I understand that. My question to you is, how will this impact Transcom ability to move troops and cargo from this day forwards?
Yeah, thank you. I'm hopeful as I watch the first two used ships being purchased through MARAD and the Navy. These are the first critical steps of a much longer sea lift recapitalization plan. I am thankful for the appropriation of up to 5 used ships in the FY22 omnibus. But I do recognize we can only purchase 2 of those until the Navy has submitted their plan. I understand they intend to submit their plan here soon, and I am also anxious to see how we can work together to continue to recap in a comprehensive program going into the future.
Thank you. Chairman, I yield my time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Carl. Thank you again to the witnesses. Before we close, Mr. Garamendi had a final closing thought.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue of Red Hill has bounced around this committee hearing a few times. We did not focus in this hearing on the remediation and the issues in Red Hill. That'll be in a subsequent hearing. General Van Ost, we've talked about this, and I'm sure you'll be prepared when the time comes with all of the appropriate people. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. Again, thank you, General Van Ovost and Acting Administrator Leslie, for your outstanding testimony. Obviously, the interest level this year, based on past years' experience, was definitely very intense, and really appreciate your great answers, and look forward to working with you and your staff as we move towards markup. And with
Chairman?
that, oh, sorry.
Say goodbye to that guy on your left. Thank you on behalf of all the members.
That's right. This is
You helped
it.
us tremendously, and you helped your country.
Yep. We still have a cell phone. So anyway, okay. Thank you. The hearing is now adjourned.